Good afternoon, friends, dear learners. It is an absolute pleasure to host this program for you. In fact, over the period of the last 6 months, we have been interacting through a series of videos. But the problem with the videos was that we could never interact face to face with you. This YouTube mechanism gives us a opportunity to actually, at least in a delayed mode, meet many of you. And it is our absolute pleasure once again to host this webinar for you. The reason why we are coming in this mode is that during the course of our modules, we could not introduce to you certain elements of environmental sustainability which we seek to introduce through this series of webinars. This will be the last webinar for the January to June batch. It has been an absolute pleasure bringing this program to you, and I hope all of you have enjoyed with us this course on environmental sustainability. As always, the pleasure is all mine to welcome Dr. Sindhu P. Nair, Head Regional Evaluation Center and Deputy Director, IGNOU Regional Center, Cochin. My colleague, Dr. V.T. Jalajakumari, Assistant Regional Director at IGNOU Regional Center, Cochin. And also Dr. Prasida Unnikrishnan, Assistant Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Center, Cochin. As you all know, I am the course coordinator, Dr. M. Rajesh, Regional Director, IGNOU Regional Center, Bangalore. We shall not spend any further time on these introductory aspects, but we'll go straight into the agenda for this program. Each of us will be presenting a certain area on environmental sustainability in a very short spell of time, which will introduce to you certain concepts which we could not introduce in our main course. So stay tuned till the end of this program. This will be valuable for all of you. And also, this is an opportunity for me to welcome the learners of the new batch also who have joined this, and the admission for that batch is continuing. This session shall be useful for you as well. I'm sure many of you will be joining in due course, and you will be taking benefit of this course. So without much ado, let me go ahead and present my topic for the day. I will take a couple of minutes to mount my presentation. I hope my presentation is visible to all of you. Could any of the panelists just confirm?
Yes,
my
sir.
presentation is visible? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Visible.
I shall be talking today on environmental Kuznets curves. Now, this is one area which I could not cover in the main course. So I felt that this is one area which would be of some significance to environmental economics as such. And therefore, I am introducing this topic to you. I may take approximately 15 minutes to present this topic. If you have any doubts in this regard, you can definitely put it in the chat box, which I will be opening up for you in due course. You can put all your queries in the chat board based on any of the presentation that we are going to put forth to you today. And at the end of the program, we will be trying to address the queries that you have raised. So my topic for discussion today is the environmental Kuznets curve, which is of some importance in the field of international economics, as well as the area of environmental economics as such. Now, this concept of environmental Kuznets curve has been derived from the area of Kuznets curve, which is entirely different. In fact, environmental Kuznets curve is a adaptation of the concept of Kuznets curve, which Kuznets, a very prominent economist, introduced in the 1960s. What he said was quite simple. As an economy grows, there is an increase in economic inequality at higher rates at the beginning, then it will peter out, and economic inequalities will start diminishing once the economic status of the country improves and attains the status of a developed country. Now, why is this so? In the initial stages of production or the initial stages of economic development, what you will see is that there is an oversupply of labor. There is a migration from rural areas to urban areas in search of better jobs and higher incomes in the initial stages of development. So, what you see in the initial stage of development is that rural labor moves more and more away from villages into cities because of obvious reasons that in rural areas, as we discussed in our previous webinar, there is this concept of disguised unemployment which is in play. That is, the marginal productivity of labor is either zero or even negative in many of the farms, and therefore you have a large pool of disguisedly unemployed people who are not actually contributing to the rural incomes, but they can be easily moved away from the villages to cities and industrial establishments there where they will be contributing positively without affecting the rural incomes and employment scenario. So in this model, we find that in the initial stages of development, a large pool of labor moves away from villages to cities. So you have a large unemployed pool from which the capitalist in the city who is running the industries can choose from. So labor supply in the initial stage outstrips the demand for labor in the economy. And therefore, when the demand for labor is lower than supply of labor, naturally the wages will be lower. And profits will be very high, resulting in high income inequality. Now, as you can always visualize, in the initial stages of development, the people who are highly skilled, like engineers, etc., will be in high demand but in short supply. So they will be also getting a higher level of wages, whereas the unskilled labor will be in plenty supply, and there will be more and more unskilled labor moving away from villages towards cities, which will result in a situation that the labor will have lesser wages, the unskilled labor will have lesser wages, whereas the skilled labor will have higher wages, plus the capitalist who is investing money into the industries will have high profit. Because of this, what happens is that you have a situation of high income inequality. 90 to 95% of the population has low income, whereas 5 to 10% of the population has high income, leading to high income inequality. However, as the economy progresses, education gets widespread, more and more people are educated, then the industry also moves away from the traditional labor intensive industries to a service sector oriented industry. And as a result of that, what happens is that the wages increases because skills have also improved in the meantime. The education scenario has improved, the working conditions of labor has improved, and as a result of that, what happens is that as the economy progresses, there will be higher wages, and this income inequality which we had initially referred to will subside. So gradually, what you have as a scenario is that you have an inverted U-shaped curve. That is, initially you have higher inequality, gradually it peters out, and as the economy reaches a developed stage, the curve once again lowers itself, showing lower income inequality. So that is what the Kushner curve was all about, and therefore it is on the basis of this Kushner curve that the economists later on introduced something called the environmental Kushner curve. Let's see in detail what that actually implies. Now, maybe the font is a bit smaller, so you will have to concentrate a bit on these slides. What does the environmental Kushner curve actually state? It shows a relation between pollution level and economic growth. See, that's how the innovation has taken place. It shows a relation between pollution level and economic growth or income levels. So what it states is that pollution increases during the earliest stages of development at a increasing rate. It peters down in the middle stages of economic growth, and as resource use and waste generation increase, you find that pollution actually grows in the initial stages of development. Once pollution levels reaches the highest stage, when economic growth becomes robust, emissions starts falling due to the fact that at higher levels of growth, countries are able to invest more in pollution reduction technologies and initiate better awareness programs against pollution. So, the scheme is very simple. That is at initial stages of economic growth, since you can always imagine that pollution preventing technologies will not be in good supply, and the technologies associated with with production will be more polluting than later on. You have higher levels of pollution at the initial stages of development, but as income increases, economy grows, and the government has higher revenues, they invest more and more money in pollution preventing technologies, and there is also a greater awareness among people that pollution is not the way forward for economic development. If you have to have a better level of life, you have to ensure that pollution free environment is ensured in the economy as such. This shows that there is a positive income elasticity for environmentally friendly products. What does that mean? It means that as incomes increase, people prefer more and more environmentally friendly product as against the situation where they were preferring environmentally unfriendly products in earlier phases because they did not have higher incomes to spend on that. Better information and awareness regarding adverse environmental impact also becomes the norm as income increases. So, what happens is that governments also chip in with greater environmental friendly awareness programs, which in fact help our people to move away from environment depleting production processes, and they also the producers also become aware that they should also move away from these environmentally polluting production processes. And even though the environmentally friendly products may be a bit costly, the consumers also over a period of time, due to better income levels, start preferring those products which are produced in a environmentally friendly manner. However, what we should all understand is that this principle cannot be made applicable uniformly to all the countries. Why? Because all the countries are at different stages of development. For example, countries like India have been under British suzerainty for well over 200 years, and they care the least for environmentally friendly technologies. And at the same time, England was depleting the resources away from India and utilizing it for its own development. So it attained a higher rate of development by the time India reached its independent stage. So what happens is that such countries as India will find it difficult to invest heavily at the initial stages of development on environmental friendly technologies. But now, after 70 years of independence, what has happened is that now we have enough income and resources to invest more on environmentally friendly technologies, and that is what is happening now. And this was true for most developing countries over the period of time. Now, lower population and high economic growth makes it possible to invest more in environment protection, and that is happening in developed countries. In developed countries, the population growth rate is very low. The population itself has stabilized, and high economic growth has given them higher and higher levels of income. So, and the tax revenues are also higher with the government. So, it is now possible for these governments to invest greatly in environment friendly technologies, and that's the reason why you have a greater preference for environment friendly products in developed countries. However, in countries like India with higher population growth rate, the cost of environmental protection will also be greater, because you have to look at environment protection at all the levels. In fact, you have to look at the local level, you will have to look at the national level, you will have to look at environmental protection in terms of the state level also. So, in countries with high population and lower levels of development, you have to take uh, more initiatives to ensure environmental protection as against the developed countries which already have the resources to invest greatly in these mechanisms. Now, what do the economists say? Now, economists such as Munisinghe, they say that it is not necessary that developing countries follow all the pitfalls those are associated with the development process, because we now know what have been the pitfalls or the negatives that the developed countries have already undergone. So now it is possible for countries like India to avoid those pitfalls and introduce environment friendly technologies without reaching a very high level of income itself. At this stage itself, we can learn from the experiences of developed countries and introduce better technologies which help, what you say, the protection of the economy as such. So that is possible with the case of developing countries, and these can be adopted with great gain. That is what economists like Professor Munisinghe say. They say that our economies can adopt environment friendly technologies at lower levels of development, as I was just referring to. So, what it implies is that we need not actually reach a level of peak environmental degradation, often associated with high levels of development in many countries. We can take precautions right now itself, and we can definitely tunnel through the environmental Kuznets curve without reaching high levels of environmental degradation along with the process of economic development. Now let's see what the environmental Kuznets curve looks like. Now, as I was just referring to, in the pre-industrial phases, because of the lack of adequate environmental friendly technologies, and also due to the fact that development processes were environmentally uh, very negative and obstructive in nature, you have the what you say, environmental degradation or pollution increasing at a very high rate in the initial stages of production, that is in the pre-industrial stage. However, industrial economies, once they reach that stage, they use their resources to develop better environmental friendly technologies. And then what happens is that your economy reaches a stage where your development need not be actually associated with greater environmental degradation, and then the curve starts petering down and reaching and it ultimately reaches an inverted U shape when the economy actually moves into the post-industrial or service economy mode. The advantage with services like IT and all that is that it is very less polluting, and lesser amounts of pollution is actually required to develop the economy. That's why these days developed countries are reaching out to this kind of phase where you have high economic development, but your emissions and degradation of the environment is very less. So that's why you say that in the case of Kuznets curve, the Kuznets curve is an inverted U-shaped curve, which shows that along with higher levels of economic development, you have lesser and lesser environmental degradation, and the reasons are all there to see. Now, let us see what are the country experiences. I am taking the first case of Bangladesh. What I have done is that I have used R, which is a software, and fixed a quadratic curve. And I have taken two variables, that is emissions of Bangladesh and per capita income. What you can see is that as the per capita income goes on increasing, the emission levels of the Bangladeshi economy is petering down, which means that even though in the initial stages of development you had higher levels of emission, now as the Bangladeshi economy is becoming richer and they have higher levels of income, they are now investing more in environmental friendly technologies, and now the results are there to see. And the curve is now gradually taking an inverted U shape. So, environment, as far as the Kuznets curve is concerned, from my analysis of data based on the emissions of the of the Bangladeshi economy, as regards the per capita income in terms of Dhaka, their local currency, definitely the Bangladeshi economy is moving towards an inverted U shape. That is what the empirical evidence based on World Bank data tells me. Now let's move to another country, our western neighbor, that is Pakistan. Here, the results will give you another insight. In this case, you can clearly see that as the income of or the per capita income of the in GDP terms, as far as Pakistan has increased in their local currency terms, you don't see the kind of inflection that you see in the case of Bangladesh. Now, in the case of Pakistani economy, the emissions are taking a U shape rather than an inverted U shape, which at the current moment tells us that as Pakistani economy is developing, you are getting a higher level of environmental emissions at this stage. Maybe in future they will also follow the inverted U shape of the Kuznets curve. But at this moment in time, we can what the data actually tells me is that the Pakistani economy is taking a U shape rather than an inverted U shape, which we can see in the case of the Bangladeshi economy. And this is in association with a higher level of emissions as the income levels of the Pakistani economy is growing, and that is what the Pakistani experience is showing us at this moment. Let me mention a word of caution. This is not permanent in nature. As the economy grows further, you may actually see the inverted U shape of Kuznets curve actually operating in the Pakistani economy also. And this is based on very limited data that I could procure from the World Bank site. So let's move forward. Now, what about China? China, as you know, is becoming an economic superpower. And as with any other country in the initial stages of development, they had higher emission levels. And now we can see that the Chinese economy is actually investing more and more in environmental friendly technologies. And we can see a clear and pronounced U shape coming in the case of Chinese economy. I taken the per capita GDP in yuan terms, which is the local Chinese currency, versus the emission per capita emission of the Chinese industrial sector. Now we can clearly see that the Chinese economy is taking the inverted U shape, which is associated with Kuznets curve. So they are definite. We can definitely say that yes, the Chinese economy is moving ahead, and we are seeing a inverted U-shaped curve coming into play as far as the Chinese economy is concerned. This is as far as the World Bank data is concerned. Now, coming to our dear India, our own country, we can see that in India also, in the initial stages of development, there was an increased emission rate. However, now the Indian economy is also witnessing an inverted U-shaped Kuznets curve developing or evolving, and we can surely say that this is because of three or four major reasons. One reason is the role of judiciary, which has brought in lots and lots of legal precepts which support the economy and which support the environment without compromising on economic development. Then we have the role of environmental policies which have been brought in by the union and state governments, which have helped environmental development. Then we also have in the international cooperation in terms of technology transfers and other things, which have in fact clearly resulted in a pronounced emphasis on environmental friendly technologies. And definitely Indian economy is also on the high growth trajectory, which gives the government also higher and higher income or tax revenues, which can be invested more and more for environmental friendly technologies. And that's the result that we are currently witnessing a kind of shift towards a Kuznets curve as far as emissions in the Indian economy is concerned. Now, finally, to sum up, there are certain economists like Rudra and Chattopadhyay who state that in India, states like Kerala follow an inverted U shape because, as you all know, Kerala is one state where the traditional industries are not found in large numbers. So here we have a inverted U shape curve as far as the environmental Kuznets curve is concerned. But several states such as Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Maharashtra, they are not having this kind of a trend. They are still in the nascent stage as far as the environmental Kuznets curve is concerned. And over a period of time, that is maybe after several decades, only Bihar, UP, West Bengal, Maharashtra, etc., shall have an inverted U-shaped curve coming up. But The trend is clear. The trend is there, all in favor of an inverted U-shaped curve. That's the environmental Kuznets curve operating in India. This is as far as my presentation is concerned. Thank you, one and all, for giving me a patient listening. And now I shall stop the sharing of the slide, and I shall return back to the main menu. Let me now invite, with absolute pleasure, Dr. Sindhu P. Nair, Deputy Director, IGNO Regional Center, Cochin, to go forward with her presentation. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very interesting area that you really covered about how GDP and the environment-friendly technology is very interesting and very new area to listen to. Now I would move on to my presentation. Let me just share it. So is it visible?
Earlier it was visible, madam. Kindly.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Sir. Is it visible, sir?
Not at, madam. I think
Just a minute, sir.
the sharing is not mounted yet.
Just a minute. Sir. Just try again.
Yeah, please try.
Is it visible, sir?
Yes, ma'am. It's visible.
Okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity and this next online session with our learners. So the area that I thought I could talk to with our students is on the environmental considerations and concerns in use of solar and wind power. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, could you just raise your voice a bit, ma'am, so that it becomes
Yes.
more audible?
Yeah. So I was telling that the topic that maybe we can just discuss on is the environmental considerations and concerns in use of solar and wind power. So, if you would recall that in our course on environmental sustainability, we dealt in detail about the solar energy, how it can be used under the broad area of environment-friendly technologies, both in terms of the solar thermal technology and the photovoltaic technology, and also about wind power. So how we can basically use it as environment friendly technologies. And just to have a recap of that, because in those modules you are basically talking about the advantages and how it basically operates. So there is no denying the fact that these are environment friendly technologies, given that they are natural resources freely available, and we can very effectively tap them for effective use for our power requirements. In case of solar, it can be effectively tapped during the day for effective use in our energy requirements. These are environment friendly because they do not cause pollution, as in the case of other fuels or emissions from automobiles, etc. And also, very importantly, these are renewable in nature. So, if you recall, when we talk about environment-friendly technologies, primarily we tend to think about the solar energy and also the wind energy. So, these are renewable in nature, and the way that we tap solar energy, as I just mentioned, is on in two areas. That is using the thermal technology, where sun's heat is being utilized, and the photovoltaic technology, where sunlight is being used to generate electricity. And again, for this solar power being captured and being used as an environment friendly technology, we are aware that it can be used both at an individual level or a home based unit level in terms of solar energy, maybe having small units at home, or it could be on an institutional or on a very mega scale, as in case of many big institutions where they try to go in for solar power as such to power their energy requirements. And in case of wind also, though we mostly talk about mega projects, it could also be a one single unit project, single unit setup if it can be tapped in an area where wind power has scope. So, what I'm trying to say is that these are environment friendly technologies as we always refer to them, and there are clear advantages as far as their adoption, yeah, basically in the area of environment sustainability is concerned. And in talking about wind power as such, we know it is basically to generate electricity using the wind energy. And it is one of the big advantages is that it is one of the cleanest energy source, renewable in nature, and also providing job to large number of people, and somewhere related to the gross development or the economic development of a nation, etc., on a bigger level. And of course, there are some disadvantages also. But basically, this session I thought was that we could probably also keep in mind, because there is an aspect that though we talk about these technologies as environment friendly technologies, to make it environment friendly in its true form, or in the spirit of environment, being an environment friendly technology, probably there are some areas which we need to be uh, considering when we are going in for such kind of projects, and that is why this topic has been chosen, and I'll be going through those areas here. Now, definitely, when we go for solar based projects or wind projects, definitely the priority is that we are going in for an environment friendly option instead of the traditional old ways where we are going in for more of lesser sustainability patterns. So therefore, this environment consideration is there in the first place. But nevertheless, when we go into actually adopting and implementing it at a project level, there are some aspects which we need to be aware of. For instance, one is the resource requirement and the location choice. Because anything that we do in our environment, there is some kind of an change that is happening in the environment. Some resources go into making of a new technology, making of anything as such. And here also, when we're talking about the resource requirements, an environmental consideration is required at that stage also. When I talk about resource requirement, is that we need to be cautious at that particular level as well. That when we though we talk about solar power or wind power, there are some resources that go into the making of these projects, and whether these inputs that go into are also in line with the concept or spirit of being environment friendly. That is the point that I would like to tell here. Apart from that, an important aspect is the location choice. We all are aware, that solar projects or wind projects, especially if it is on a mega scale, it requires a large area. Large area means probably mostly it is land area. Of course, we can have small solar units set up in our homes, in small establishments, on the rooftops, etc. But generally, if we talk about these projects, there is a resource requirement, there is a land requirement involved. Now, land being a resource which can be put to different kinds of uses, and being in the topic of environment sustainability, it calls for that we need to think in terms of whether this land that we are using in for this environment friendly technology is the best choice. That is, suppose it is a land which is very much an agriculture or a very fertile land. Is it that we need to go in for having a solar project there? or setting up wind turbines there, having a wind farm there. So that particular area is something we need to keep in mind. What I'm trying to say is that when we go in for deciding for installing or putting in place a solar project or a wind project, that becomes paramount important, because if you're going to trade off a very agriculturally very fertile land, it could have been used for bringing in agriculture produce. So we are basically losing on that particular aspect with going in for this technology. So that kind of a trade-off, whether we have a better area to go in for, better location to go in for, could be one aspect on a higher level of decision making when we are going in for such kind of projects. Similarly, if you're going to go in for an environment friendly project, maybe a big solar installation is going to come in a particular area, which is otherwise very prime location, which could have greater spin-off benefits in terms of having big establishments, other aspects, which should bring in its own benefits in terms of bigger development for the locality. Then again, there is a trade-off. So this is what we need to be aware of. Though we keep telling that these environment friendly technologies, there is an inherent aspect of decision making or judicious decision making as far as the resource requirements or location choice is concerned. Now, for instance, if we have a large area which is a biologically very rich area, or a big forest area or some kind of areas, of course, the thought primarily would be about what is to be preserved. So, such kind of aspects is one thing that we need to keep in mind. Or in fact, the cost of environment protection. Basically, in this previous talk also, sir was mentioning about the cost of environmental protection. So at what level are we ensuring that the environment is protected while we go in for the environment friendly technology? Other thing is the scope for power generation. Just because it is environment friendly technology does not mean that we need to just straight away go in for this particular technology, say solar or wind. But is there a scope for it? Because when we go in for a technology, when we go for implementing a technology, there is a resource input going in. There is an input, there is a process, there is an output. So does the scope, is there ample scope in terms of the cost benefit that we are going to get, in terms of the environment protection that can be ensured, is something we need to keep in mind when we are looking at this concept of environment friendly technology, be it solar or wind. Now, again, this topic of having environmental considerations and concerns, it definitely would vary if you're talking about establishing small home units. If you're going to have a solar panel system established in our own homes, of course, the level of looking at environmental considerations and concerns would be on a very low level. And we would definitely be having a greater freedom to go in if it's a small unit or an individual based unit. But if you're going for an institutional level unit or a mega unit, in terms of environmental considerations, it has to be well thought of. And the concerns, if any, has to be addressed while we go in for implementing or putting in place an environment friendly project. Now, another important aspect that we need to keep in mind is the habitat. Because if you're going in for a wind farm in an area, or if you're going to install solar panels in an area, definitely there is a natural ecosystem, there is a habitat there, which is basically the natural home or environment for an animal, plant, or any other organism there. So when we go into put in a project, a solar project or a wind project, definitely there is going to be some kind of disturbance, some kind of interference with the habitat. So to what extent is that going to have an effect, or what kind of change, what kind of modification is going to happen in the habitat in the area that we are going to propose the environment friendly project, is one aspect very important that we need to look into. Because the kind of area that is involved, especially in big projects of environment friendly technology, be it solar or the wind, that is one aspect we need to keep in mind. And whether that can be mitigated or that can be avoided is one question that we should keep in mind when we're going in for these projects. Now, coming
Ma'am,
to the other.
ma'am, just a minute, ma'am. The slides are not moving. Please check.
Now, is it moving?
No, ma'am.
Just a minute. I'll just go back and reshare. Okay. Thank you.
Madam, it is better to put it in full screen mode and do it. So that will be
Yeah,
far better.
just a minute, sir.
Yeah, sure.
I hope it's visible now.
Yes, madam. Now
Yes.
it is moving.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about this interruption. So, just continuing with that, the next point is about the noise. This is of paramount importance because, on a long term scale, we know that wind turbines, when installed in big farms, there is this disturbance of noise as far as the local habitat is concerned, or the people in the local area is concerned. So, when we're going in for a wind project which is environment friendly, the cleanest source of energy, and all that, what is the kind of other kind of disturbance or kind of loss that we are bringing in terms of the noise that is created, and for the local small organisms or other animals in the vicinity, is one aspect that we need to keep in mind. Because even though we say it's environment friendly, there are some aspects which would come in the process of installing the environment friendly technology, being the noise in case of the wind project. Now, what I want to highlight here is the trade off. So, though we say it is environment friendly technology, there is a trade off even at in a subtle level. And when we go in for, or as environmentalists, or who really look at it from the angle of environmental protection or minimum environmental or unsustainable practices, we need to be aware of the fact that there is a trade off happening. And the right option is that how do we minimize that trade off? I would not say it is possible to go in for zero trade off, or totally go in for a 100% environment friendly in all aspects if you look on a holistic scale. But then there is some trade off happening. And if the trade off is happening, to what extent are we doing the trade off to our environment when we are going in for the bigger benefits of the environment friendly project, be it the solar or the wind? So that is one important aspect that we need to keep in mind. And the other aspects also, for instance, in case of solar projects, often we read in the literature about these solar panels, the silicon cells which are used, and about the concerns of its manufacture, etc. There are concerns about how environment friendly is the production of it, and the manufacturing and installation is one aspect. Apart from that, when we are installing solar panels, there is an aspect of it being mounted on large area of land where the local vegetation is being traded off. So in terms of area also, there is a trade-off with the local vegetation that would otherwise have been there had the solar project not been in place. And the other aspect, which is also very important, is about the water seepage or the groundwater levels. Definitely, when we have acres of land with big solar mega projects, as we know some examples that we would be aware of, there is a trade-off in terms of the groundwater and other aspects. There is some difference that happens with regard to having huge installations of these projects. And the other is about the loss of agricultural produce. Had it been an area which would have been used otherwise for agricultural produce, then we are basically trading off for that kind of thing. And therefore, what I want to highlight here is that when we go in for such projects, that trade-off should be kept in mind. Now, to quote an example, is that about the wind projects that has been there in Rajasthan. We read in the literature about the harm that this particular wind projects is doing to the the birds there. That is the great Indian bustard birds in the wind farms, because these wind turbines we know are mounted on high levels, on high heights, and these birds flying in those areas, they are not aware. Many times their life is at threat. So a lot of research is now happening in that area as to how we can minimize being the environmental damage or the damage to any species. How much we can avoid is one question that comes up. So as we go in for more and more environment friendly technologies, our thoughts also need to probably be concretized into the area where we minimize our intrusion into the natural habitat to the maximum extent possible and keep the trade off at the most minimum levels, so that we really can vouch that we are definitely going for a more environment friendly option. So these are some thoughts which I wanted to place here in this session. That's all from my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, Sindhu, madam, for that very concise but precise and effective presentation. You have brought in many aspects which I feel have been more or less covered in your main presentation, but you added value and substance to it in a great deal in today's presentation. Thank you for that presentation, madam, and we have all gained a great deal from what you have said. And I am sure our students will also benefit a great deal from the presentation you have made. Moving on further, it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to invite Dr. V.T. Jalajakumari, Assistant Regional Director, IGNOR Regional Center, Cochin, to make her presentation on a very important topic. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Second time we are coming on Strive, this streamline. As you know, my portion was my module.
Madam, you are muted. Kindly unmute yourselves. Madam,
Yeah.
you are muted.
Yeah.
Sorry, sir. From
Yes.
starting itself or now?
Now it's okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Now it's okay. Okay. Thank you, sir. So, friends, we were going through a lot of local environmental education strategies, many other efforts from NGOs and individuals for promoting environmental sustainability. And I think you will be remembering uh, the first module, environmental education first module, which is Introduction to Environmental Education. There, some of the theoretical aspects of environmental education and many other efforts from the side of many people were just giving us a hint to give you some examples, and we were promoting you to go through promoting you for going through some other elaborated examples and elaborated stories regarding the points given in the topic. Now I think it is better to give a look into a particular point where we were telling about biological altruism. And just for showing the biological altruism, I have given you one example of uh, the cultivation of mangrove trees in the northern part of Kerala, that is Kannur. And I was showing you one video and picture by giving some links. I'm sure that you may have that memory with you, because you are at the verge of the closing of your classes of this January-June session of certificate course. So it is better if I am giving a little bit elaborated story of the same mangrove trees for giving you more details about the need of sustainable activities in the society, and individually also you can. Let me open my PPT. Please wait just a minute. Sir, is it shared or not?
Yes.
Shared,
Yes,
no?
ma'am. Yes.
It is shared. It is shared.
Okay,
You can
okay.
go to full screen mode, madam.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure, sir.
Thanks.
Yeah. Fully you can see now, no?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay. So, my dear students, welcome to the story of mangrove trees and the environmental sustainability. So, as you know, that mangrove trees have a very big concern and very big role in the sustainability process of biodiversity, and we have to focus on this particular thing because many other reasons. Because this is not only protecting the environmental uh, survival or the ecosystem. Other than that, in many ways, mangrove trees are helping human being in their livelihood. So let us go through the details of the protection, its growth, and the uses of mangrove trees in our day-to-day life. First, we have to think where we can see this. Especially why I am telling that this is a wetland forest. And this wetland forest, you know that it is extensively seen in the tropics and subtropic areas. As our India, our nation, is in the tropic area of this Asia continent, other than that of the areas of Asia or other continents, this wetland forests are extensively seen in the subtropic areas of Asia, in Kerala also, because we were starting our story from Kerala. Kerala is also one of the such area, and the largely growing wetland forest, mangrove trees are seen in almost many parts of Asia continent, and they are richly grows in fresh water than salty water. You know that the coastal areas are uh, always highlighted with this mangrove trees and forest, and then you may think that the seashore areas and the lake shore areas are enriched with wetland, this mangrove tree wetland forest. But why we are telling that it is richly growing in fresh water than salty water? There are many experiments are there, many studies are there to know the extensive growth of mangrove trees, where it is whether it is growing well in fresh water or in salty water. The wonderful studies revealed that the richly growing mangrove trees are seen in the fresh water than salty water. You can see a lot of YouTube videos also in this regard, because the growth of mangrove trees can be searched. You can browse it and you can find the experiments done in many countries, in many areas, and many time. Have you seen the natural beauty of the adjoining of rivers and lakes just before entering to the sea? I think in many of the coastal areas, that beautiful scene is there. Means the rivers are coming from mountains and some hills, and it is flowing down, and it enters to the lake just before entering to the sea. In that area, that adjoining areas, we can see the clear divide of fresh water and salty water with a different color, and by the external appearance itself, we can separate both the fresh water and salty water. There, the difference between mangrove trees also is clearly seen, because the richness of the mangrove trees are clearly seen in the fresh water. That is also a natural experiment. But beyond that, many experiments are there. So it is a better place. It's a very rich place in Kerala because Kerala is rich with a lot of rivers and the adjoining delta areas just before the sea entry. So that areas are giving you a knowledge regarding the richness and the growth of the geographical peculiarity of this mangrove trees. And these mangrove trees give a lot of services to our ecosystem. The first part is giving us services in our provisions which we need for our day-to-day life. In ancient time, where the places were rich with mangrove trees, people were using mangrove sticks for timber purposes. They were using it for many livelihood purposes. Then they were using it for fuel wood, firewood, and medicines can be made from the extract of mangrove. Natural dyes were prepared from mangrove trees, and it is a very good ecosystem for honeybees. Very big honeycombs are there in the midst of the thick wetland forests, and that was also a big resource for honey. Like that, a lot of marine food is available in the habitat of mangrove trees. How the marine food means the seafood, not seafood, because this part is separately we were telling as freshwater and lake water areas. It is not it is there the coastal area of sea also, but marine food, why we were telling that all these type of different types of watery surfaces are there, so we cannot simply say it is seafood only. So that one of the biggest seafood exported to all over the world is prawns, shrimps, etc. All these are richly grown under the mangrove trees. Like that, the coastal environment regulation process is also going on with the help of the mangrove trees. In that coastal areas, mangrove trees can stop or resist flood. They can erosion. They can help from soil erosion. Like that, the salt water intrusion can also be stopped by these mangrove trees. Like that, it can make a rich carbon storage in the earth where the forests are located. So, have you heard about the impact of mangrove trees for supporting us from tsunamis, then storm? Like that, it can stop the hurricanes. Also, there are many tourist places where mangrove trees are uh, nurtured. Also, it gives a lot of botanical education, and it gives opportunity for indigenous knowledge and the study of traditional lives in the areas where thickly mangrove forests were grown up. So I can little bit more I can say about these things. I was telling about the indigenous things, knowledge, livelihood. Especially one example I am giving here in Indonesia. Studies are telling that there are 3.2 million hectares of mangrove forest growing extensively in the 5 big islands of Indonesia. They are Java, Sumatra, Kalimantan, Sulawesi, and Papua. All these places, all these islands, there are thick mangrove forests and almost 157 species of mangrove trees are cultivated here, and these are used for construction materials, but their traditional homes were mainly made from the part of the branches of the mangrove trees. So for timber purposes, we were telling about earlier. So for construction purposes, they were using this mangrove trees. Like that, the roof was made and thatched. That is what Naipa thatch. Especially this is in Indonesia and in other places also. This is what the indigenous knowledge we were telling about. So Naipa thatch is one of the method for using thatching the roofs. It was used for that, and sap for vinegar. The sap of the mangrove trees were using for making vinegar by adding some other chemicals, not chemicals, it's natural things only. The people were very brilliant and they were very experts, and they have the expertise to make vinegar like uh, uh, this preservatives, and they were making wine and other food drinks from mangrove trees. And in addition to that, again we can say that how mangrove forests were helping us in our livelihood. Mangrove forests were a big productive ecosystem. It's always a big productive ecosystem where it is home, because as it is home to diverse and rich marine coastal species. Hundreds of species of prawn are growing there, and other fishes are also growing peacefully without the disturbance of any other means human being also. And another particular thing is that you know that the reproductive process, reproduction of these type of particular species of fishes and prawns are being done there because the the root of the mangrove trees are holding mud and water together, and there is no flow of water underneath these trees. So without the disturbance of any other movements of this water resource, the egg of these fishes and varieties of uh, uh, animals means small creatures, are safely being there, and the reproduction of these species are highly happening underneath of the mangrove trees. For that purpose also, naturally, many people nearby their home, they are rearing up different types of mangrove trees for their personal fishing purposes. In ancient time, there were some strategies for this type of aqua culture, and they are known as silvo fishery. One is known as silvo fishery, the other one is agro silvo fishery. Again, agro silvo pastoral fishery. These are some of the indigenous traditional systems of agriculture, means aquaculture, and through which the fisheries businesses were done in earlier times, in olden times. Now also, the advanced scientific methods are adopted for protecting this type of new technologies to aquaculture purposes, and shrimps and prawns are highly uh, reproduced, and they are nourished underneath of these mangrove forests, and that business is going on in the with the help of the mangrove forests. And at the intertidal tropical coastlines, due to the unpredictable climate change as a result of the rising global temperatures. You know, nowadays, everywhere global warming impacts are there. The degradation, environmental degradation is mainly happening only because of the global warming. So, a lot of other climate changes happening, and without any prediction, we cannot say at what time rain comes. We are saying, we are telling it, we are predicting it, but defeating all that predictions. Sometimes unexpected hurricanes will come, unexpected heavy rains will be there. So that type of natural calamities, we cannot do anything from our side. Whatever technologies are there, developments are there from our side, most of the time we are defeated by the natural calamities with the unpredicted um, climate change. So the coastal areas are, we can safely put the coastal areas in the hands of mangrove forests. Why? Because this vulnerable uh, climate change or the vulnerable sea is always coming towards the land, and it is taking away the coastal community many times, especially in Kerala. This is happening everywhere in Alappuzha district, Kannur district, and in Ernakulam. These coastal areas are always damaged with, or it is taken away with, uh, these vulnerable climatic changes. So in that areas, this will be a very good fencing with the the mangrove trees, that this frequent catastrophic weather events can be to a great extent resisted by mangrove trees. And studies again says these waves of uh, high tide, tsunami, all can be lost up to 2 by third of their original height. In 19, I think 2004 something, 4 was the tsunami happened, especially in Kerala and the western coastal areas in Arabian Sea. And at that time, 30 feet and more than that was the height of the waves. The mangrove trees can resist the 2 by third of the height of these high waves by its branches and its root, because they are stiffly uh, rooted in the mud in the coastal areas, and a single wind or a little bit of this type of pressure cannot push it on, and it cannot break the fencing strength of the mangrove trees all through the coastal area. So the mangrove trees are a very big protecting fence uh, while this type of natural calamities happens. And another study, especially I have seen in the Journal of Natural Resources and Environment Management, mangrove forests were extremely effective at storing carbon also. You know that the biggest threat to our environmental pollution is the carbon emission. But the mangrove trees are highly efficient to store the carbon, environmental carbon, and it is pushing the carbon um, uh, compounds to the root, and it is storing the carbon in the uh, land where it is located. The particularity of this carbon storage is the carbon storage underneath the mangrove forests are kept as such without any other chemical processing for centuries, for thousands of years. And this will help for making the fossil fuels. And we know that in fossil studies also, this type of carbon compounds kept in the land, in the soil, is very helpful. And that way also, this help to protect the environmental carbon emission, environmental pollution as carbon emission. And in fact, the mangrove forests can store 3 to 4 times more carbon in their soils per hectare than those of other tropical forest types. Means any other forest area other than that of is wetland forest. And additionally, this carbon can be stored there for several centuries. This is what I told earlier. And you can also refer this journal study. It's a very beautiful study given in this journal, and you can refer also when we are giving this as additional reading. this source will be helpful for you to refer with the different aspects of mangrove forest, how it is useful for protecting our environment through environmental sustainability. So now I think I have to tell you especially that we were adopting a lot of environmental education strategies in the modules. I think you remember all of them. So several demonstrations have been given in several parts and several modules. Here also, I want to give you a small demonstration. It is taken from another source in YouTube, and the link is also given here. If you go through this link, a beautiful thing you can see means how mangrove trees are resisting our earth from storm, how it is resisted, how storm is resisted by mangrove trees. You please have a look to this video for just a minute.
Good grammar and spelling are important, but if you want to write essays that inspire, messages that...
Okay, please come back. I'll show you again to the... One second, please. Let me leave from this area. Okay, come back. Sir, slide കാണാൻ പറ്റുന്നുണ്ടോ? Sir, can you please?
No. Now it is visible, madam. No, please come back
Yeah,
to the
I'll come
earlier
back.
one.
I'll come back. Yeah.
Now it's visible.
Okay. I'll come back.
Now it's gone. Please come back.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I know. It's there.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay now.
Now it's okay.
Visible. Yeah. What you were, I have to ask you, what you were seeing in this demonstration? A beautiful video was there, and where some mangrove trees were there, and it was in an experimental basis. They were nurturing these mangrove trees, and strong waves of storm-like waves were blown to that mangrove trees, and how it is pushing on the first layer of trees, and what is the status of the rest of the trees. The pressure of the storm is not at all coming to the last end of the portion, the trees. So like this, mangrove trees can resist the pressure of the tsunami waves, at the same time the storm also. So this type of many experiments can be seen in the videos. You can go through that, and it is not only protecting the climate changes, also it is giving a combat, and they are also combated at the source, and a lot of studies demonstrate that this is effective at storing carbon. I have given and we have told it about. So at this particular circumstance, dear students, I have to ask you, what has to be done from our side? All our earlier modules also, whatever we were telling theoretically and what we were demonstrating, after that, definitely as a student, as a participant observer or a learner, we also have the responsibility to do something for the protection of the mangrove trees. That is what we have to think about. So nowadays, more than 1.9% of mangrove forest is being lost. That is what studies says. Even if we keep the account of these mangrove trees as such without disturbing further, studies say that we can save the carbon emission equivalent to 50.5 million cars. So means the emission from the 50.5 millions of cars equivalent to that carbon emission, the currently growing plants of mangrove can protect the earth. Even though it is damaged or the mangrove forest is being lost, we can protect the status as such for the safety of the environment as equivalent to the carbon emission done by 50.5 millions of cars. Then what will be the result if we are increasing the rate of growth of mangrove trees all over the world, or if we are covering the target of Global Mangrove Alliance, that is a big alliance, and they are doing the campaign for the growth of mangrove trees all over the world, and their expectation, their target is that by 2030, 20% of mangrove forest has to be developed all over the world. Then you think, if this much of effect is there with mangrove trees for us, for protecting us from the carbon emission, what will be the result by 2030 by increasing the area of mangrove forest 20%? That is what we have to think. So, what is our role? What is our role to be the part of this participatory approach or active participation? Participatory mangrove rehabilitation organizations can be convened, and we can adopt a lot of techniques and individual level participatory activities, projects at local level and government level can be developed, can be organized to be the part of the people who are working for sustainable development, and through which we can also attain the sustainable development goals, and we can also be the part of a little bit of the contributions we can give to the sustainable development goals by cultivating, by farming mangrove trees. And nowadays in the home gardens also, people are planting varieties of mangroves. Some are very big, very tall, and some are like bushy. So I told you almost 200 types of mangrove trees are there all over the world. So you can select which one is suitable for your garden, which one is suitable for your home atmosphere, where watery sources can be contributed, can be given to this mangrove tree. If you are living in such an area, definitely you can also plant one mangrove tree. We also have to, you all can, the participants and the organizers of this program, this course, can also try to plant some mangrove trees at our home to enjoy the fruit of the environmental sustainability part of this natural thing, and we can also protect our ecosystem as such. So this is what I have to tell you. And now again I am giving you this picture. This picture is given in the module earlier. In the module 1, I told you that. Do you remember the person's name? He is Kandal Pokudan. Only he is having a second standard level education. He studied up to second standard. He didn't know how to write, how to read, but a book is there. Not one book, many books are there regarding the planting of Kandal forests and how Kandal forests are protecting our earth. He wrote with the help of some other people because he was telling his experience, and he was one of the most celebrated person in the world for cultivating mangrove trees. He is from Kerala, Kannur, and all these stories I have given you in the module earlier. And this additional points I have been giving you for enriching your knowledge and your enthusiasm to study more about mangrove trees and about Kandal Pokudai, and this may sometimes help you for doing something more in environmental protection. This is what I have to tell you. And, hope you got a little bit of points regarding mangrove trees, and you can also try more, and you can also share with us in the our conversations. And thank you very much for hearing us this much of time. And for our coordinator, sir, Dr. M. Rajesh also, I'm very much thankful to you for giving this opportunity. Thank you once again.
Thank you, madam. Thank you for that very elaborate session on mangroves and their importance to the society and to the environment in particular. Definitely, there are a lot of issues which can be dealt with under the broad area which you have covered. And I'm sure our students will take a lot of interest in this regard and take forward the words that you have put forth before them. Now, it's my a privilege to welcome Dr. Prasida Unnikrishnan, Assistant Director, IGNOR Regional Center, Cochin, to deliver her talk on a very important area that's related to wildfires. This is something that has been affecting many countries across the globe, and I'm sure after her presentation, many of the issues and concerns regarding this area will be discussed in some detail. I welcome you to the floor, Dr. Prasida Unnikrishnan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your kind words. So I just begin with my presentation, sir. So kindly just... Sir, is my presentation visible, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, madam. It is visible. It is visible.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So it's always a pleasure, dear learners, interacting with you all. As you all know, my module on environment in society, I have tried to cover the various aspects which are affecting our environment in society, like pollution, air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, and in fact population, forest degradation. So these are some of the factors which I have already covered in my module on environment and society. And this aspect of wildfires, in fact, very recently in news, you all must have heard about wildfires raging in Australia, raging in Brazil, and raging in US. So after going through the news reports and various articles, I felt this topic needs to be covered in my module on environment and society. So today I am going to explore what causes wildfires and what are its effects on environment and society. In fact, according to Wikipedia, a wildfire is an unplanned and uncontrolled fire in an area with combustible vegetation. So it is also called as forest fires. In many, it's also called a bush fire. So you have many names for a wildfire, and it's totally unplanned and uncontrolled. It can happen due to various causes. It may be due to a human-made error or a natural error also. So it is, in fact, you can say one of the most common natural disasters, and which causes large-scale destruction to human life and property. And it indirectly and directly affects the environment and the society we live in. So we need to understand this concept of wildfire from a more societal perspective, as well as to how it affects our society in a way, and how we can move ahead with this type of disaster. So there are different names which are given to a wildfire. Like in Australia, the wildfires are known as bushfires. Somewhere it is known as forest fire. Somewhere it is known as desert fires, hill fire, haze. So these are the various names which usually connote the term wildfire. So, what are the causes of wildfire? In fact, the causes of wildfires are many. It can be natural as well as man-made. So, in US, in a country like US, where wildfires are very common, wildfires are mainly caused due to man-made error rather than a natural error, natural disaster. So, the natural causes of wildfires are global warming, dry climate, lightning, and a volcanic eruption, because many a times global warming is a very in thing right now, and we are seeing the temperatures rise every year. And with the rise in temperatures, there is a large scale effect of rising temperatures. There is an increasing droughts, and drought is one of the major factor which causes wildfires. And the man-made causes of wildfires are many, and this could include like debris burning. You have to The debris which we burn accidentally also causes wildfires. Sometimes even smoking a cigarette and throwing it also causes wildfires. Even the sparks which are thrown from equipments and railroads, like the power lines and etc., all can cause wildfires. There are many camps which are held in forest areas, like the campfires, and the accidental ignitions also cause wildfires. Just I would like to share some of the statistics in US, which is according to the Insurance Information Institute website. It's a very informative website, I must say, with respect to wildfires. So all of you can kindly refer also the same. In this website, it says that 90% of the wildfires in the US are caused by people. So with this, you can understand that it's a human error which causes wildfires more than rather than a natural error, natural way. So in between January 1st to August 5th, 2021, there were around 38,707 wildfires compared to the 32,941 in the same period in 2020. I've just given a screenshot of the graph of the wildfires which occurred from 1980 to 2020. So if you see this graph, you can see a steady rise in the incidences of wildfire. By seeing the graph only, you can make out from 1980 to 2020, the wildfires have risen, and the frequency or incidence of wildfires have risen. And this shows that the climate change is a real thing, and we need to focus on the factors which are causing the climate changes and the increase in temperature. And this has also caused that the incidences of wildfire across the world have been growing steadily. According to the National Interagency Fire Center US, about 3.4 million acres were burned compared with 2.3 million in 2020. So that also shows a rise in the number of areas which have been burned by wildfires. And on August 5th, just recently, 2021, 9 states of US have already reported 100 large fires, including Montana, which has 25 fires burning, and Idaho with 20 fires. So even now, US has this wildfires, which is a problem for the country, and which is causing large-scale destruction and havoc in the places. Let me also take you across some of the worst wildfires in the history, and I have just identified three of them, but you can identify more also. You can also identify more wildfires which have been even worse than this wildfires which I'm just highlighting. You must be knowing about the recent Australian 2019-20 bushfires, and the Brazilian 2019 wildfires, and the California wildfires of 2021. So these are some of the, I must say, the worst wildfires in the history. And some of the major wildfires, just I will briefly discuss about the same. The Australian bushfire. In news also, it was very recently, the news was also there. The Australia is facing a severe bushfire problem. And it was seen that this is also known as Black Summer. You can see the Sydney Opera House under haze due to this wildfire. And this period, that is the between 2019 to 20, was a period of unusually intense bushfires across Australia, wherein fires burned 18.6 million hectares, and more than 34 people lost their lives, and over 5,900 buildings were destroyed. So you can see the impact of the wildfire, which has in which human lives are also lost, and some thought needs to go onto how wildfires can be managed more effectively, so as to we can reduce the losses which are happening due to the wildfires. The Californian wildfires of 2021. The Californian wildfires, a succession of wildfires have burned across the state of California in the year 2021. And according to Wikipedia, a total of 6,049 fires have been recorded, burning around 884 acres across the state, and more than 400 buildings have been destroyed, and at least 7 firefighters have been injured battling the fires. And the wildfires are increasing due to the climate change in the state of California. So this Californian wildfires are still ongoing in the country of US. So what are the effects of wildfires on environment and societies? Wildfire are a part of nature, but it can turn serious, and it can destroy homes, it can destroy trees, it can destroy human life. And the effects of wildfires on environment and society are both positive and negative. So I would be highlighting both the positive and negative effects of wildfires on environment and society. The gas which is emitted by a fire is carbon dioxide, and that is released into the atmosphere. So this I have already discussed in my module on air pollution. So wildfire is in fact cause large-scale air pollution, and the exposure of this gas can cause long-term health issues, including respiratory and cardiovascular problems in human beings. And wildfires also cause extensive deforestation and loss of life. According to a WHO, wildfires and volcanic activities affected 6.2 million people between 1998 and 2017, with 2,400 attributable deaths worldwide from suffocation, injuries, and burns. In fact, the size and frequency of wildfires are growing every year due to the climatic changes, and hotter and drier conditions are drying out the ecosystems, and thus increasing the risk of wildfires. So day by day, the risks of wildfires are increasing, and the effects which wildfires have affects not even the physical aspect, but also affects the mental health and psychosocial well-being of an individual. So these are some of the effects which wildfires can have on our environment and society. So now we would try and explore the positive effects of wildfires. In fact, whenever we explore any aspect, there are some positives and there are some negatives. So in a wildfire, the positive aspect is that it provides nutrients for new generations for growth. And the fire encourages the disintegration process of vegetative matter so that nutrients return to the soil. And some new plants begin the process, start germinating. So new species or some new plants germinate in the process. So if fires were prevented consistently in a forest, eventually it would just grow old and die because there wouldn't be another generation to take its place. So this is one of the positive aspect, wherein it gives life to new species of plants, and some new vegetative matter grows in this process. Wildfires also help to kill diseases. In fact, insects, it is said that insects kill more trees than forest fires do. And the fire refreshes the habitat zone and enables more natural habitat to remaining plants and animals, and few trees means more water. So that is one way. It's a very positive effect of wildfire, we can say. And it can also say that low intensity fires generally do not harm majestic trees, and thus the ground level of the forest gets cleared in the process. So these are some of the positive effects which of wildfires have on our environment and society. Coming on to the negative effects of wildfires, as I already said before as well, it causes an increase in pollution, wherein there is a release of particulate matter like carbon monoxide and nitrogen oxides and non-methane organic compounds in the atmosphere. And there is also a rise in health issues, because the exposure of this gas can cause long-term health issues, including respiratory and cardiovascular problems. There is also an increase in mental issues because it affects the mental health and psychosocial well-being of an individual, and it also causes stress and grief to the people who are forced to flee from their homes because of wildfire. Even the negative effect of wildfire is that there has been a change in climate, and due to this climatic change, the size and frequency of wildfires are growing every year, and hotter and drier conditions are drying out the ecosystems and thus increasing the risk of wildfires. In fact, the losses are also, wildfires cause mass destruction, and this causes enormous loss, not only to human life, but to the entire homes, villages, and communities are displaced in the process. And these all are some of the negative effects, and the unsustainable use of natural resources, like our extravagant lifestyle, and the unsustainable means in which the natural resources are being used presently in our environment, also contribute towards climate change, which has in fact affected the frequency of wildfires. Because as from the statistics which I showed you earlier, you can see that the frequency of wildfires is increasing every year, and now the frequency with which the wildfires are occurring is comparatively more when compared to the earlier times. So this definitely indicates that there is a definite unsustainable use of natural resources, and thus that has led to the frequency of wildfires being more. So what is the government action to prevent extreme wildfires? So I have referred one article written by Karen Camper, who is a global director of World Bank, who in a blog on 5th June has mentioned that wildfires, in fact, are an additional burden for the governments of the country where wildfires are happening, especially in the current COVID-19 pandemic situation. The wildfires are an added burden on the government, because you have to also manage the pandemic situation along with this additional environmental disaster as well. So there is a World Bank policy paper on managing wildfires in a changing climate. Maybe you can refer it on the net. I have given the source as well, wherein the 5 suggestions were given. In fact, they have given that you can manage wildfires as per the 5 suggestions which the governments of the various countries need to follow. And the first suggestion was one need to refocus the land use policies and incentives. That is better planning of the lands which are being used, like the habitats. Like there should be the human habitat should be a bit far away from the forest where the frequency of wildfires is there, so that a better land use planning and management needs to be in place. Second is we have to invest in both fire suppression and prevention. That is, wildfire management has to be treated as an emergency rather than just a routine landscape rather than just part of a routine landscape management. So whenever a wildfire occurs, it should be done in an emergency manner rather than just being part of a routine landscape management policy of the government. And the third suggestion which it was given was that implement existing fire management techniques like proven practices and tools. As you know, there are in various countries, various fire management techniques are followed. But now with the technological advancement, one needs to upgrade our fire management techniques. Like now, recently somewhere I read use of robots and drones is also a part of fire management techniques for controlling the wildfire. So the existing fire management techniques needs to be implemented by the countries for the prevention of wildfires. And fourth suggestion is to improve wildfire data collection and analysis. The data collection on wildfire needs to be increased so that the countries as well as the governments understand what causes a fire, and the gaps can be identified, and a preventive response mechanism can be developed in the process. And the fifth one is to strengthen stakeholder coordination and preparedness. In fact, I was reading it somewhere that in wildfire management, even the community participation is very important. That is, a participatory approach needs to be followed, wherein not only the governments but also other stakeholders like the local communities and the private sectors and the civil society organizations are all involved, and they plan in such a way and they clear their functions and tasks and responsibilities, and this will ensure a better coordination at the ground level so as to tackle the wildfire crisis effectively. So that means a participatory approach needs to be followed to strengthen the stakeholder coordination and preparedness for the wildfire. So these are some of the few suggestions which had been given, but more suggestions, if any, can be added upon by you. So what are the lessons which we have learned from wildfires? Every spark is important, and like a casual throwing of a cigarette butt in the forest can also induce fire, and this may be due to human negligence, especially like cigarettes, trash burning, electrical gadgets, and other reasons. As I already mentioned earlier, in US, 90% of the wildfires are caused due to human negligence. Hence, we need to be, as a citizens, we need to be very careful whenever we are in a forest area, especially in a dry forest area, and any negligence on our part can induce fire. So whenever we go for any camping or are using any of the electrical gadgets, we have to be mindful. So these are the lessons which one learned from wildfires. And also controlled burns are important tools for maintaining the safety of the forest. That is, whenever you are burning trash, you should burn it in a controlled temperature so that it does not flare up, and that flaring up may again cause a wildfire. So controlling the temperatures for the trash which is being burned is also very important. And certain technological interventions in the firefighting mechanisms are also needed, like the robots and drones, etc. All need to be used in managing a wildfire. And the residents, especially who are living near the forest, need to be cautious and aware about the effects of forest fires. So supposing if we are living near the forest, we need to be aware. There should be a proper mechanism in place, like you should have a respirator with you. You should be alert on all these aspects. Supposing you are finding difficult to breathe, you should have a respiratory mask with you. There should be a room specific wherein which is isolated and outside air doesn't come. So some sort of such mechanisms, and also the residents need to have some community warning system. So such are certain mechanisms which are needed for the residents who are living near the forest. And this can happen only if there is a participatory approach between the communities, and the responsibilities of individual communities to remain safe while facing wildfires, like adequate community warning systems, have to be in place. So these are some of the lessons which I could identify, which we can learn from wildfires. But in case there are more points which can be added on to the same, you can definitely add on to it and write about the same. So I come to an end about this topic on wildfire and its effects on environment and society. I'm sure some idea you would have got about wildfire and how it affects our environment and society. And I would just like to end with a quote from Amit Ray, which rightly said that humanity should not remain insensitive to the forest fire or wildfire every year unless we act. The loss of biodiversity and extinction of herbs, birds and animals, and the pains of the trees, birds, animals, and the poor is also alarming signal for the extinction of humanity itself. So this typically summarizes this session, I must say, and thank you all for listening to me patiently. And I'm sure any of the doubts which are there for the session would definitely be taken upon. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prasida, for that very interesting presentation in which you introduced us to many aspects related to wildfire, which is something of a problem for many countries, right from Amazon forest on to the Australian forest. It is a problem, and this is something the world community has to sit together and deliberate upon as to how this kind of a phenomenon can be avoided in future. Thank you for that presentation. And I think we are coming to the end of this program. If any of the participants have any doubts or any clarifications with regard to any of the presentations made today, kindly put your questions in the comment box so that we can respond to them. Of course, this presentation will be available on this link on YouTube. So if anyone has missed out on today's live presentation, they can definitely join and make good the loss. Anyway, till this moment, I am not seeing any comments popping up. So it would rather imply that all the presentations were clear and there is no doubt as regards the presentation and its contents. So I thank each and every one of the participants to have joined this program on a Sunday afternoon. I know being a Sunday afternoon, you may have other preoccupations at home and outside as well, but thank you for joining. That shows your interest in this very important field of environmental sustainability. Be with us for future programs as well. Of course, for the January to June batch, this is officially the final session. However, we'll be further doing these kinds of video programs for the future batches as well. If you are interested, all of you can keep joining those sessions and also watch it on YouTube. It is also my privilege and pleasure to thank Dr. Sindhu P. Nair, Dr. Jalajakumari, Dr. Prasida Unnikrishnan, who have joined this live telecast on a Sunday afternoon, keeping aside all their busy schedules and work at home. And it has been a pleasure to be part of this team as always. And I hope we can take forward this team effort to future days as well. Thank you one and all. And it has been a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.